definitely wanted to get these guys in here and talk about being a therapist, mainly what happens when not only do we have to deal with the difficult experiences of our clients, but also when it happens to us on the outside. I've given the metaphor of burning the candle at both ends, and quite often that often happens, giving therapists a pretty interesting squeeze. And just being able to navigate both sides of things when you're being burnt out by the client and you're being burnt out by your real life, what may happen in it, of whether it be grief and loss or whether it may be, just trouble in your family. What happens to the therapist when that happens, and how do they kind of break up out of it? And when is it their time to go to therapy? So tune in. What's good, y'all? What's good, y'all?
Yo, we back with another one.
You're tuning in again.
Finale.
You're tuning in again to Therapy House. Only one way to celebrate is getting together with the fellas, shooting the shit, talking about this podcast. So, yeah, where are you guys coming into the space with? Where's your mind at?
Feeling accomplished, man. And in regards to Therapy House, we set this goal. We've been talking about it for quite some time, and we made it happen. It's just kind of something that I've been sitting with today. Like, man, like this came to fruition, and here we are in this episode. I'm feeling good.
It's beautiful.
Good times.
Yeah, I also feel accomplished that we've been able to make this happen, and can't wait to see the next steps of how we start working on the logo, how we start doing some of those business side elements, and trying to get this to the masses, But I am glad about the topics that we all chose. Mm-hmm. And I think that we've been having some deep convos out here. We've been getting vulnerable. We've been getting deep. Mm-hmm. Been searching for that meaning. All kinds of stuff, all kinds of paths. But today I think we were going to talk about that feeling burned out, that kind of being at two ends. Two ends is something, right, Jay?
Exactly. So, thanks for tuning in to I guess it would be season finale of Therapy House, season 1.
Finale.
So, as John said, it's been a long time coming. I think for the most part, when we moved in together, we've been just tossing the idea around. Well, not even, but even before we moved in, it was
way
just like, therapy
before.
house. Of just the idea of, hey, looking at the market, since I already do my own podcast on Black mental health, and John does his, already being in the realm of podcasting and talking about stuff and working in therapy since Santa Clara University, we've looked at the podcast market. There's not really a space that kind of talks about up-and-coming therapists, what they didn't learn about, their interests, or at least kind of the struggles that we went through. Mm-hmm. On top of that, we also saw that there wasn't a place where people were allowed to look behind the therapy couch to see what was going on, kind of a place where therapists kind of actually go in depth about the intricacies of the work that we do. So why not? That's a niche, and we wanted to fill it. So we created the podcast. And so when me and John were kind of brainstorming with a couple of ideas of how it would look, who we invite, who we bring in, do we bring rotating guests, do we keep this just with the boys? And then eventually get into topics, ones that we felt strongly about, I came with this episode, this burning the candles at two ends. Because working with clients, we are naturally invited into their worlds, their conflicts, their struggles, what they want to get better, their deficiencies, and what things have been hard for them. And so we come into the world, and as much as we try not to get into the pit with them, as much as we try to guide them through the process from afar, some of their pain, if not all, we live through vicariously, or we take on ourselves. So it doesn't just land in the therapy room or wherever we do therapy, because community based, whether it's in our car or at Starbucks, it goes with us. Sometimes home, sometimes in our relationships, sometimes within ourselves. Sometimes we take that upon ourselves to be their solution. As an early therapist, that's been hard to separate. But somehow we find ways. We pick up hobbies, podcasts, or going to the gym, or riding our bikes, listening to music. We create separation routines. Come home, take a shower. You figuratively take off your therapy hat and put it on the hook. We journal about it, and that in part kind of adds to our candle. It lets it burn a little longer, and we feel a little recharged. But something that wasn't told to us, something that wasn't explained, something that wasn't talked to us about work when we have supervisors and this whole setup, internships, was that what happens when shit happens to you? What happens when you have issues with your supervisor or your job? What happens when you lose somebody? They pass away. What happens when you have a kid? All this stuff kind of taxes, weighs on you, and in a sense adds a flame to your candle, but this time at the bottom. So now it is burning at two ends. And now we're forced into a place where we have to figure out which one we let burn more and do this kind of tandem between the two. So thinking about that, what's that experience like for you guys?
Well, I honestly, I never thought about it that way, Maya, because it wasn't until you mentioned burning the candle at both ends that it made sense to me what was going on. I think for the longest time it was like you put on your therapy hat, you're there for your client, your experience of burnout, but your metaphor, like it really hits home, and I think it takes a therapist or a helper to really understand what that means. That you are essentially, burning your own candle, right? Like, and sometimes it's a slow burn. Sometimes, like depending on how taxing the things are, it kind of starts to go a little bit quicker, but you really hit the nail on the head when it comes to this two-way thing. And I always, I never imagined a candle to have two sides, right? But it makes so much sense as a therapist how, on one hand you got your own shit and your own life, your own adversity, right? Because life never stops. Your therapists aren't perfect. I mean, when you're in the therapy room, you're either a reflection, you're a helper, but when you leave the office, you got to go home, you got to deal with something. And it really just hit home with kind of what that means. And, to not get too clinical, I think the only time that I really understood that was in a class where we talked about like triggers. And, I don't want to use too many fancy words for our listeners out there, but there's this term called countertransference, right? Where sometimes things that happen in the therapy room provoke something from your own past, right? But that is a very specific thing, right? When you're talking about a certain theme, but at the same time, like, shit, sometimes like I'm working with a client, and it's not necessarily like a personal trigger, but I'm just fucking tired, like shit, like I'm just going through something. I haven't eaten yet, or I gotta still like, shit, I gotta spend time with my partner, and I gotta, I gotta come and record my podcast, I gotta come and do all these things. So I'm constantly burning that candle, like you mentioned.
Shit, or if we were even talking about countertransference, what if that shit has something to do with your past? Some unresolved trauma that you hit, whether it's child abuse and you're working with a kid with child abuse. Then what? Then that's like something that evokes within you and stirs you up, and then this client becomes a little bit more heavier to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, for me personally, examples of when clients talk to me about being undocumented, it kind of just like the first time that I had a client come up to me like that, it was kind of like, oh shit, like somebody else is going through this too. Like,
Mhm.
how am I supposed to be supporting them when I'm also going through that? And that fine line of like, should you disclose that information or not? Is that something that you are gonna also bring up in the session as like a therapeutic thing, or are you just gonna have to kind of put that mask on and say like, no, I'm just here for you. I can only imagine what that's like. And that unfinished business, it is really, it can sometimes get in the way, for sure. I don't know what everybody else got, what other kind of things come up for y'all, but for me, that's definitely something that happens.
I think for a recent example for me of kind of that countertransference, and also was just kind of heavy. Like there were a couple times I cried, thinking about a client, a little case out here where the kid has a chronic medical condition and is muscular dystrophy, and so like he's starting to get weaker. He just got diagnosed with like an eating disorder because like he's lost so much weight. And I asked the mom, and if she felt like this was a sign that of further decline, in her son, and she just kind of said, yeah, just kind of cried a little bit, but it just sucks, and I've been working with this guy for like quite a while. Pretty cool kid, but he's got this shortened future. And I think for me, like even in the past, like this has been such an enriching case for me because I got to practice doing an advanced directives with this kid. And that was something that I did with my godfather, who passed away a few years ago. And so I even knew about that process. I was like the first one who like had ever asked him like, what kind of quality of death would he like, and just like, what his family would think about some of his decisions and end of life care. And I was the only one like really asking him this shit, but it's also stuff that like really I went through, and so, the other day, he got a little bit worse. And so I was just like, damn, just hit me and made me go through all that stuff when my godfather was going through brain cancer, I mean.
And with that, do you feel like that kind of affected how you were hitting those questions or how you were doing the work with him during that session?
No, I think I held it together during the session, and it was just more like a response afterwards, just like usually when a visual that I like for people entering therapy or their whatever is like, they're carrying all this stuff in a backpack, and you get to the room, and so they get to like take off the backpack, all this shit that they've been carrying throughout the past week, right? They get to just take it off. But like after sessions like that, sometimes it's like, damn, like I gotta take off this fucking big ass suitcase on my shoulders because I've been hearing everybody's shit today, and that fucking burns you out after a while. You got to have a balance of self-care. And if you don't, man, it is going to affect the work.
What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, man. I just listen to all your stories, and I think of the fact of like, as not like for me, it's not like countertransference, but like what I'm thinking about at that time when I was burnt out was, it was like a series of things that were going on in my life. You know how you were talking about like how when we're dealing with our own shit and then we're handling other people's like shit, and so that can really just you burn yourself out because you're going through your own stuff and emotional stuff and dealing with those hardships in your life, and then you have to hear people's hardships and you're just like, dude, I'm going through it too, you know what I mean? And like I remember when I was going through my own stuff, like I was like thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I'm going through it all, dude. I'm like, and I'm helping people here, like who's here to help me? Like I was having a lot of those moments in my burnout because I'm like, dude, I wish I can had someone to tend to me and care for me, those
Right.
moments, but I'm like, I'm giving, but like who's giving back to me,
And I think I would also like to add too that, I'm proud to have made the decision to go back into therapy, my own personal therapy when I've hit some of those moments. Mm-hmm. I've done a few rounds of therapy throughout my life. I was court mandated during my parents' custody battle. When I was about 13-ish, family therapy, mainly me going after, parents didn't work out with that. But then later in my life too, after the death of my godfather, having to go back, and I saw the free person at SCU, like helped open up some questions, but really spurred me to go into like more long-term work. You know, just even work on myself. You know, I know I've dealt with anger issues in the past, you know, especially the way that I have expressed anger. And that's something that I think is an intergenerational thing, even with my dad, you know. And so definitely proud to say that I've gone back to therapy at different moments in my life, you know, even ending relationships, being in relationships, learning how to be better in my relationships, you know. It's been good. That's something that helps balance me out. But man, sometimes, yeah, there are those weeks, man, where it's hitting both sides.
Right. I think that's one of the, like, Lou brought up the point, and John capitalized on it in the sense of, you know, who helps the helper.
Yeah.
Because this is something that should be addressed. I think for my experience has been, in a sense, we are helping people who are trying to navigate things, trying to find themselves, trying to get through trauma or these moments in time where they're feeling hurt and pain and depressed and anxious. And for me to also have that experience, to also have that pain, to also have thoughts of like, I don't want to be here. I would rather not live anymore because of all this other shit because the pain that continues on. I wouldn't. And yet I have to help you inspire and find shit in life that you enjoy.
Yeah.
So, fuck. So, within that, then it becomes difficult because I work for, well, majority of us work from a place of intuition or feelings or, you know, just remembering our therapeutic approaches. And so we dig into this bag and pull out these, you know, either one-liners, as you know, see on TV, or just how am I reading this room? How am I seeing the client? How's this going to land? What intervention best works? But as I reach into this bag, it's more of I have to reach past my depression. I have to reach past of these memories. I have to reach past of like, oh shit, am I going to like lose my job? Woo, woo, woo. Kind of things like this. So I have to find some intervention to help you while I'm also trying to hold my shit together. And that's like, how can you do that?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's so difficult to manage both of those aspects, you know, at that moment, you know, and, you know, just going back to like, yeah, when I was going through my stuff, like it was like, I remember it was like one after another thing. I remember like the first thing I was hitting was like one of my best friends passed away abruptly. You know, he died of an aneurysm. And so that was such a shocker for me. And then the next thing came was like my dad got cancer. And the next thing came, I got divorced. Next thing came, my grandma passed away. It was like one thing after another, and like dealing with loss and dealing with so much like grief and sadness, like sitting there and all this whirlwind of chaos in my mind about just like what's life going to be like now, like after the divorce, like what's my life going to be? I don't even know where I'm going to be at, like where I'm going to be living, like all these things, you know. It's just like in that moment in the therapy room. And at times, like, yeah, I wasn't present. You know, I wasn't like there, you know, and I'm just listening to the client telling me their thing, but I'm just like, you know, and I'm just being real, dude. Because I'm just being, I think a lot of therapists experience that, but like, I don't know if there's like shame and guilt around maybe talking about it, because you're supposed to be this like present strong pillar for this like person in front of you. But, you know, but being honest with yourself and saying like, yeah, dude, I wasn't there. I wasn't there.
So with that, Jeremy, I mean, not a therapist, but still helping individuals each day, trying to better their life, trying to work their own stuff. What's that experience like for you, being outside of the therapist realm?
I mean, again, I feel like everyone's a counselor. We all see counselors. We all are counselors in one way or another. But for me, it's just I think I put a level of importance on it, like a value on something. Yeah, I'm going through my stuff, and like, you know, it's hard for me if I can't bounce it off someone or vent. But I look at that as like, this person is depending on me to help them with something. And so personally, like, I take a backseat to my own things to help this person, because I think subconsciously it helps me a little bit to know that I'm helping someone. You know, and then at that point, like, if I feel like it's helping me, I'm a little at ease with my own things. Like, I'm not so hard on myself about what I'm going through. because that's one area that I've always had a hard time doing, is being a little hard on myself just because I'm going through something that I can't control. And I'm like, I don't know why I'm going through this, because I feel like I've done everything right or taken the right steps, and all of a sudden something just happens. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to it's like not everyone is gonna know how to manage their candle being burned at two ends.
I think you make a good point, Jay, because you know, I also feel like I haven't gotten to that point where, I mean, I will admit I've been in moments in therapy where I'm also not present. You know, like I'm going through some shit, but I think there's also sort of this obligation as counselors, as helpers, of recognizing when you are at the end of your candle, right? Like of knowing that you are not going to be the best version of yourself for your client, whatever they need at that moment, right? And if you don't know how to define that line for yourself, you know, that's where shit gets kind of messy. That's where shit can get kind of sloppy. And if you can't kind of differentiate that, then, you know, we were just talking about how sometimes people aren't meant to be therapists, right? Or sometimes, you know, people gotta be face the truth, and maybe it's that fine line of like, shit, this is too much for me right now. I can't handle this. Maybe it's preparation, maybe it's experience, but it is kind of like that personal fine line that you got to tell yourself, like, man, like I remember early on in the pandemic, like right when the pandemic hit, my cousin completed suicide. And it just shook my family to the core, because it happened on the day of my grandfather's birthday. All my family was together, and I couldn't go to work for the next 2 days. I really just couldn't. Like, it was as strong as I felt like as strong as I thought I could be. I wasn't, and I had to give myself permission to be that. And you know, I'm thankful for my manager, for my agency of being supportive. But you got to know when you're not available, right? You got to realize that, and sometimes you know, as a therapist, you also got to kind of be like, all right, you know, I am going through some shit, but I can still go into the session. You know, like I can still help out.
Right, because I think with that Old Testament that, like, you know, the best players play hurt. So, I mean, do you feel like therapists push on that and say like, no, I'm gonna tough it out. I'm not gonna call my number.
This burnout thing that was like what I was talking about, when you know what's the line and stuff, and like when to like kind of just pull back and stuff like that in regards to your feeling burnout. Yeah, I remember like just going through that process and just kind of just pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And it got to a point where it was just like psychologically it was getting to me, dude. And like, I wish, just retrospectively, kind of thinking back about, I wish I would have maybe taken some days off, you know, from work. You know, I wish I would take some days of just like, I need time for myself and to tend to myself, you know, and just hindsight, I should have done these things for me and take care of myself and being kind to myself in those moments, you know. But yeah, then eventually I got so burnt out, dude. And I remember I took a month and a half off from work. I was like,
yeah, at that
peace,
point, dude.
Like, yeah, I was like,
everything.
fuck
Right.
all this. I'm gone, dude. I had all this PTO, and I was like, I'll see you in a month and a half. So
Left me with a lot of your clients.
yeah, I did.
Bitch.
Right.
Didn't you take like 5 weeks off before?
Yeah, it was a month and a half, dude. Shoot.
Then you're just like, fuck it, I'm quitting. Yeah.
Is he ever coming back? But no, yeah, it is important to know when you need that break. You know, I remember going through some breaks of my own and just letting the client know I'm not mentally present right now. So just give me a day and I'll connect with you back tomorrow or something. Or just being, I mean, honest and transparent is my thing with them. So I think that's the best approach when you're working with clients is they need to know you're human. We're not robots. Like, we got our own shit too. So I've done that. But, you know, I don't know. I think I was explaining this to John a while ago, but when I was down in LA, like, just feeling depressed all the time. You know, like, work wasn't going well, relationship wasn't going well, and I'm by myself. No support system down there. And at the time, relationship, you would have thought that was the support, but I didn't feel that was the support. And so, yeah, I mean, I felt depressed. Like, I literally felt I had no way out of where do I go next, and how do I rebound and how do I get out this funk? But, you know, that resulted in me relocating back up here because I knew coming back up here would be my safe space. I have the support, I'm closer to family, and I know I'm familiar. So, but yeah, man. I mean, down there, I would say my candle was nearly burnt at both ends. Like, one to go over the next. Like, it started to become one flame.
Thanks again, everybody, for tuning into Therapy House. Here to remind you to check out our Linktree at Linktree/therapy_house. There you can find all the links for our podcast website, the different platforms that we are broadcasting on, individual links to our personal pages. Like, comment, rate, and review our podcast so that we can grow. And, of course, subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when we drop something new. Until then, we'll see you next time.